And so, as Terraspine seethed in his cage, and the Nameless One's advance continued onward, taking more and more for himself, the lights prepared many plans to stop him. However, the two options that lay open to them were both dire. One involved the void, and nothing could interact with that literal nothingness, whereas the other lay in the creation of a new god, or as events would unfold, the creation of several. Neither were particularly easy choices to make, but something had to be done, and time was indeed slowly running out for all. A seed of an idea, however, came forth. The plan had been laid out, and the hosts were uncertain of this idea. However, the Pantheon of Dominia laid it out once more. "Use us to create another that can stand against him, as one," they said to the hosts, trying to get them to understand what they were saying. "We were once like him, and as such can fight using his own power against him. We know how he fights, we survived it. We have fought his threats head on. We know how their weave works. We could, with our divinity united, stand against him. Of that we are sure." "And if you're wrong," a voice from the host said quietly, "then they will become like the others, consumed and destroyed, and turned against us," another voice said. "But we ask you to allow us to do this, and perhaps use some new form of attack, or perhaps defense, so his threads may not touch us," they pleaded. Krilsis listened and took in all that was said, from all sides. A mistake could be made here, but possibly a new host of options were possible. A new host, literally. "If we were to do this," he began, "we would need to ensure that your hosts could not be used as conduits to this place, or else we would fall, should you fall. He could merely ride your tethers back here and continue what he began." "We need a barrier," another voice said. "A wall, as it were," said another. "Or perhaps we need something more," Krilsis said, his voice trailing as he was lost in thought. He had many designs for new hosts, all of which were to be his children in time, but he had a few he had kept safely guarded, just in case, and this was one he thought he would never have to see. Mainly as it meant creating a god that even he would fear, even though it would be neutral to them all. One that could take the power of a host and filter that which was not divine from its energies past to it, and then turn them away, sending them back where they had originated. A gatekeeper to their powers. "I have a solution, but once in play, it cannot be removed. And this could prove a folly if we need it to be removed." They could not understand what he meant. As they nodded along with each other, they did not understand, and he would not force this upon them unless it was needed. But should the Dominia Pantheon ever be compromised, then it would be needed to be in place. And to this end, he could not allow them to become one combined power to face the Nameless. The request was denied, and Krilsis refused to bind them together at that point. However, he said that in future it might be necessary, and they should not take this as a no, just a maybe, something for future consideration when the time was better suited. They took the response well considering their eagerness. After their meetings, Hurion heard of the denial of their request, and flew into somewhat of a rage. He was sure they could take the fight to the Nameless, but there were other ways to make this so, and he tried to impress upon them that they themselves were gods, just as Krilsis was, and that perhaps there were other ways to bind them together and create what they needed, and so he entered Lassashar to seek an audience with Temeran. Temeran met with him, and Hurion outlined his idea, one that would see the creation of a force that could stand against any foe, but Temeran disagreed. He pointed out that combining these once daemons into one would cause their personalities to create a fractured being, a psychotic powerhouse with no direction, who could only act if all could agree on a way. This could not be, as such a creation would surely fall ineptly underfoot, offering no useful resistance in battle. Hurion raged at Temeran, trying to get him to agree to aid him in the creation of this, but Temeran said no. He denied his wishes. Hurion eventually left in anger and headed out into the realms to find a demonologist who might aid his cause. He eventually found one of such a path, an old elven mage of over 800 years in age, someone much older than he, and who apparently knew Temeran well. His name was Prahl, and he already knew of Hurion's plight. He told him of a possible answer, but not what he was looking for, but for a way to combat this daemon god that was ripping up the primes. But it was dangerous. Hurion listened and took the information back to the lights he served. They listened and wondered if this was possible. They asked the hosts, and they, in turn, asked Krilsis. And he pondered the question for quite some time before letting it be known to the hosts. "Yes, it is possible," he began. "But to create such a creature would require a husk of our own divine essence, as nothing else would be able to hold such as what is suggested." The host listened on as he continued, wanting to understand just what this would mean. "The proposed idea is a warrior of pure anti-magic. But to hold such, we need something that would itself be non-magical in nature, lest it be destroyed by its own existence. In short, by being created with magic, it would undo its own existence." "What about a material of non-magical nature?" one voice suggested. "It would not be able to move or act without magic. It would merely be a stationary ward," Krilsis answered. "Would such things not be useful for fighting against him?" Another question. "Yes, indeed, but they would need to be carried, and perhaps their power only felt when touched to magic, say in a weapon. Otherwise carrying such an object would leave holes through the weave and cause untold damage to the primes." "And oblivion to the planes," a voice stated. "There is another way, although it would mean asking the Fallen One," a voice said, and they all turned to Jerini. Krilsis answered with a simple, "Not a chance." "But they would surely aid us," he said slowly, letting the words float to them all. "You know they would. It is, after all, in their very nature." "Jerini, I said no," Krilsis said sternly, fixing the trickster's gaze. Jerini shrugged. "I was just letting you know we had options unexplored." "Yes, but they cast themselves down, without permission, for no reason other than to meddle with the primes," Krilsis continued. "Ah, yes," Jerini said, smiling now he had the chance to speak openly. "But where do you think they get their power from? As it's not from the host any longer, is it?" Krilsis stopped, and seemed to be genuinely unsure. He began to answer but stopped again, realizing he was unsure, and peered at Jerini. "You have a very interesting point there, for you are correct. I do not give them power, and nor do any of you, so they must be drawing it from somewhere, and yet it is not of demonic nature. It is divine." "Indeed. They have found a way to harness something we could not. Chaos is their way, after all," Jerini said, smiling broadly to the other hosts. "And there will always be such." "Jerini, go to them. Seek them out. Discover what it is they get their power from. They are fallen, and should be mortal. Yet, as we all know, by their very nature, they are far from that. When slain, they always return, and their power still rivals our own. And yet they are a singular around the primes. Seek them out, and tell them of our plight, and find out what they can offer to us." Jerini waved his hand above his head in a gesture of goodbye, and vanished from the host. "He can be so trying at times," said Krilsis, shaking his head. "But at least another option may now be open to us."